Happy Tuesday, Dog Nation. Hopefully you had a great 4th of July holiday weekend. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Glad to have you with us. We will recap kind of where things stand for Georgia on the wide receiver recruiting front on the heels of Kojo Antwi, the four-star receiver, choosing Ohio State on Monday. That's not necessarily a huge surprise. There was certainly a thought that listen, Antwi was going somewhere else other than UGA, but we'll kind of break down what it all means. A little bit of a Tuesday surprise for us. John Stinchcomb will be here. Normally he's a Monday guest. He'll be with us here today on this Tuesday. We'll try to figure out kind of where things stand with the rollout of name, image, likeness, all that's gone on with that. So we will cover a lot of ground on today's show. A lot of fun. We'll recap some of the other recruiting news that's out there. Brandon Turnage going to Tennessee. We'll just try to deal with all of it, and we'll try to make it fun and worth your time here as well. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Make no mistake about it, I have the greatest job in the world, and I am filled with gratitude each and every day because of the job I get to do. And that's not just hyperbole, and that's not like just some sort of aw shucks attitude. I truly am amazed by how much fun I get to have doing this show, DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, each and every day. It's just something that I really love. However, admittedly, not every, no job is perfect. There's always going to be one aspect of any job that you kind of wish was a little different. And today's a little bit of an example of that. I have never really loved the recruiting autopsy shows, the show you do when you talk about why someone didn't choose UGA. There's a little bit of a hollowness to all of that. Even if the recruiting news itself wasn't necessarily unanticipated, there is still a little bit of, just kind of stinks to have to talk about why someone did not choose UGA. The man of the hour in that regard, at least for the moment, is four-star wide receiver Kojo Antwi, who did choose Ohio State on Monday. We said this on Friday's show that, listen, the overall expectation was that Antwi was probably not going to UGA, whether it was Ohio State, who he really talked up in a recent interview with DawgNation.com, or Texas A&M, who had kind of had a little bit of a familiar tie there because of the fact that his sibling lives in the state of Texas, that one way or another just probably wasn't going to be Georgia. And it seemed like Ohio State had a lot of late momentum in all of this. And the Antwi news coming in even despite the fact that in the recent interview that Kojo did with DawgNation.com, our buddy Jeff Sintel, he had some really good things to say about Georgia and some good things to say about Georgia's wide receiver coach, Cortez Hankton in particular. This doesn't matter now. Antwi's chosen Ohio State, but as a reminder, this is what he said about his feelings about Georgia coming off a recent UGA visit, really just a few days ago. Here's Kojo Antwi.
Biggest plus for Georgia? Home state. I think biggest plus is Coach Hankton, and him being real with me, and him being a genuine guy and wanting to develop me into the best where I can be.
So he likes Cortez Hankton. Says Hankton was genuine with me in terms of talking about how we could get, basically how Georgia could get him to being the best that he possibly could be. So he has some nice things to say about Hankton. Mentions the home state vibe. Frankly, I never got the impression that home state pull was all that big of a thing for Kojo Antwi either way. Ultimately, he chooses Ohio State, a program that a lot of elite receivers has chosen as of late. But it's the person that Antwi mentions there that I think does get interesting for some UGA fans of what is the role that Cortez Hankton plays on all of this? And when you have the kind of high-profile loss like this and kind of an unsettled situation for what Georgia's 2022 recruitment at the receiver position looks like, after maybe Georgia didn't prioritize that receiver position as much in 2021 as it did some others, and when you see Georgia recruiting at kind of like the top-end elite level almost across the board in almost every position group, sometimes the wide receiver position can seem a little bit like an outlier there. And there is some, I think, question of what is Cortez Hankton doing as the receivers coach? What is Georgia doing from a program standpoint to populate this roster with elite wide receivers? And this is one of those things where even if I start the program by saying I don't always love doing the autopsy of why a recruit chooses a school other than UGA, here is one of those moments where I think it's actually kind of important to have this conversation, because I think it lays out a actual reality that's maybe a little bit different than the perception is around Georgia. The truth is, while Georgia may not be recruiting the wide receiver position as well as it's recruiting some of the position groups, and while Georgia's wide receiver recruiting overall may not appear to be as strong as some of the other top programs in the country, such as Alabama or Ohio State, programs like that, the fact of the matter is Georgia, from a receiving recruitment standpoint, is recruiting way better than it has in the past, and frankly, it may be punching above its weight class right now a little bit with the receiver recruitment, given the fact that Georgia has, up to this point in time, not really given those prospective receivers a lot to see on the field in terms of how they'll be used at UGA. And yes, there's a way in which what I'm saying can kind of come across as a little bit like excuse making, or a little bit of what's the phrase that gets used sometimes, sunshine pumping about, where things stand. But actually, I think the actual truth of all this for Georgia with the receiver recruiting situation is probably a little bit better than it gets portrayed in light of losing another big-name guy from your own state. And this person, we're talking about Kojo Antwi here. So let me see if I can lay all this out a little bit, and let me see if I can get you to agree with me on this. Let's look for a moment at the last three recruiting cycles, the 2019 class, the 2020 class, and the 2021 class. And let's look at top 10 receivers according to the 24/7 Sports composite team ranking. That's the parameters for this discussion. The top 10 composite receivers according to the 24/7 Sports composite. Now, there have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There have been 7 instances over the course of the last 3 years of a team signing at least 2 top 10 receivers in that recruiting cycle. Last year, Bama signed 3, Oregon signed 2. In 2020, Ohio State signed 3. 2019, Clemson signed a couple. Oklahoma signed a couple. But do you know that of those 7 instances over the course of the last 3 years, when a school has signed 2 or more top 10 receivers, Georgia's actually done that twice? And that's not nothing. That over the course of the last 3 recruiting cycles, Georgia has signed a total of 4 top 10 receivers. I'm talking about top 10 at their position according to the 24/7 Sports composite. It's obviously George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock going back to the class of 2019. It's Arian Smith and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint looking at the class of 2020. Yes, Georgia did not sign a top 10 receiver for the class of 2021, but it signed a total of 4 over the course of the last 3 years. And when you look at those parameters, Georgia actually fares pretty well with other elite programs that are bringing in that kind of top-end talent at the receiver position. And what makes what Georgia has done in recent years the more impressive is the fact that you have to go back a long time before that to see Georgia signing a top 10 receiver at all. Forget the fact that in 2019, 2020, Georgia signed multiple top 10 receivers for both those recruiting classes. Prior to the 2019 season, you have to go all the way back to the 2009 recruiting class to find the last time Georgia brought in a top 10 receiver in the country, when it obviously brought in Marlon Brown there for that year. That, yes, Georgia wide receiver recruiting may lag behind the rest of the country a little bit, but actually over the course of the last couple of years, Georgia's done a bunch to close the gap compared to where it was when Kirby first took this job, and frankly where the state of that position group recruiting was prior to Kirby Smart getting here. There had been a huge drought of elite receivers, top 10 level receivers. That was not the kind of waters that Georgia was swimming in from a recruiting standpoint, but over the course of the last couple of years, that has started to change. Now, here's what's obviously true. That in the years to come, this needs to change even more. And this is where you zero in at what's truly at stake for Georgia this year. You can continue to kind of pay attention to the internet and the preseason chatter and all the stuff that's out there in the so-called talking season, and you can continue to see a little bit of skepticism remaining about Georgia's true ability, or maybe it's its true willingness to transform its offense, to join the rest of college football that not only, when you mention the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the Alabamas of the world, LSUs of the world, not only do they bring in elite receivers, but they make them even better while they're on campus. They exploit their talents each and every Saturday. They give them tons of stats, tons of highlight plays, and then they move them on to the first round of the NFL draft. That is something that up to this point in time, Georgia has not done. And there is some skepticism out there about how much Georgia will do that here in the 2021 season. But if it does, if it takes, and let's face it, one of the problems facing Georgia a little bit is of the 4 top 10 receivers Georgia signed over the course of the last 3 recruiting cycles, 3 of them have dealt with pretty significant injuries, and one, Arian Smith, has been banged up there a little bit there as well. So Georgia's had some injuries with some of the top receivers that it's brought in. But even with that, this is still a pretty talented receiving situation at Georgia right now overall. More talented, I would say, than anything that Kirby Smart has had from the receiver position since he's been at Georgia in 2016. So now is the time to take what you have and get the most out of them and make household names out of 2, 3, 4 of these guys. And if you do, what looks to be a little bit of a gap between Georgia and the other top programs will start to take care of itself when it comes to receiver position. However, overall, just kind of sum all of this up. Yes, there is still work to be done. Yes, Georgia needs to get more out of the receivers that it has so that it can join the very best teams in the country in terms of producing prolific offense and being the kind of destination that elite receiver recruits want to choose. But let's give a little credit where credit's due, to even be in the position that Georgia is in to potentially have a breakout season from its offense. Georgia had to go out and win some recruiting battles that maybe some folks wouldn't have necessarily expected them to win. They've actually brought in more top receiver talent over the course of the last 3 years than maybe they've been given credit for. It's simply a matter of using that talent, producing with that talent on the field, so the next generation of Kojo Antwies or whatever other receiver you want to think about here, maybe those receivers are a lot more likely to consider UGA in the very near future. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Glad to have you with us today, no matter how you get to us. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, or on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Great to be back with our friends on the radio again. Of course, podcast, as wherever you find them, the Apple Player, the Google Player, Spotify, worldfamousdogNation.com. Many of you listen right there on SoundCloud. However you get to us today, big thanks for you being here. Thanks for making it all possible. And, of course, a big thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making the show possible. You know, Engineered Solutions of Georgia, proud partners of UGA, make them fun to do business with. Also, longtime friends of ours here on DawgNation Daily there as well. So I'm proud of our relationship with them, too. And I'm very confident as well. You know, we've had some rain. We may have some more coming up the next couple of days with the Hurricane Elsa kind of moving through the Atlantic Ocean a bit. Well, with all of that going on, rain coming in, many of you, it kind of produce a little bit of anxiety because you see those wet spots show up, garage, crawl space, basement maybe, or you've been noticing for a while those cracks that kind of exist in your foundation in the walls of your house, and you know that could be the sign of a problem, and you're not really sure what to do about that. Well, let me give you some peace of mind here. The first step is so easy because my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia, the number is very easy to remember. You can simply call them 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. And when you do, you'll have a very easy conversation to have with some very, very smart folks. This is a solutions-based company, so the conversation is going to center around a solution to the problem you have. Sometimes it's a simple fix. If it is, they'll just tell you, go to the hardware store and get whatever. Other times, there's more substantial work that needs to be done, but all the more reason you want good, smart people doing that for you. As I said before, my friends at ESOG, too, full-time engineers on staff. So make sure you check them out today, Engineered Solutions of Georgia. As I said before, give them a call, 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. You dial that number, that'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia, proud partners of UGA, longtime friends of DawgNation Daily. Check them out for your foundation, your waterproofing needs. Before we go around the doghouse here in just a moment, let me also take care of a little business here. I told you the last time we had a show, which was pre-recorded for Friday, that by the time we spoke again on Tuesday, there was a very good chance that a lot of our DawgNation Invasion tickets would be sold out. So I have some bad news, good news. I'll do bad news first, and then I'll give you what I think is a very exciting piece of good news. The bad news is that the tailgate-only tickets, for those who are already going to be in Charlotte, we have exceeded our capacity on that. We're still taking a few wait list names on that, but for now, the tailgate-only tickets are sold out. If you want to get in there and be on the wait list, I think you can do that. DawgNation.com. We may leave a little more wait list room on that, but for the most part, those tailgate-only tickets are sold out. However, here's the good news. That the VIP tickets, we actually still have a few of these left. So for the folks who want to be on the bus, leave from Atlanta there on that Saturday, a well-stocked bus, if you get my drift, all the way down to the party going to be taking place rolling down the road up 85 to Charlotte. If you want to be a part of that for that, and of course it's still the luxury tailgate. Once you get to Charlotte, we're all going to spend the night in Charlotte there at a hotel there that night, and of course coming back to Atlanta on that Sunday. No game ticket for this. This is just the tickets for the event itself in terms of getting to Charlotte, enjoying the tailgate, spending the night that night, coming back on the luxury motor coach there the next day. So if you want to be a part of all that, the good news is there are still some VIP tickets left. Now, my prediction is these are only going to go for a couple of more days, and they're going to be gone. So please get in there, be a part of this. I'm going to be on the bus. The Dog Nation folks going to be on the bus. We're all going to be rolling down the road together, enjoying the party, having a great time. We've done this over the years, and it's always a ton of fun. So DawgNation.com, a few VIP tickets left for you to be there with us for that. That is going to be incredible. Let me see the graphic on the screen one more time because I want to give a shout-out to all the sponsors who've made this so much fun. The Finnish Long Drink, of course, Meriwether and Tharp, our friends at Kroger, and R.S. Andrews. So please reserve your spot today. Dog Nation Invasion to Charlotte. VIP tickets remain, so check that out online at DawgNation.com. All right, I've got John Stinchcomb coming up in just a moment. Before that, I want to go around the doghouse here today, assisted by my friends at AAA, and let's see if we can kind of spin this into a positive light in the wake of four-star wide receiver Kojo Antwi choosing Ohio State on Monday. First of all, there's this. There a little bit of chatter still involving another four-star wide receiver. I thought Jeff Sintel had a very interesting story at DawgNation.com the other day looking at Andre Green Jr., a four-star wide receiver out of Richmond, Virginia. And much the same way, we've heard folks profess this in the past, Green Jr. also sees a nice relationship forming with Georgia here. So if you're looking for kind of a silver lining in the wake of someone choosing something other than UGA, let me read this quote to you from Andre Green Jr. recently with Jeff Sintel at DawgNation.com about his feelings on Georgia. He says there was really a lot to like about Georgia, everything from the facilities, the sports staff, the treatment, etc. But the most important thing was the people, having a great relationship with the coaches and Coach Smart, Coach Hankton, there's that name again, and Coach Monken was always the most important thing. But meeting their families and having the interaction truly made it feel like family. Once again, that's four-star wide receiver Andre Green Jr. Via Dog Nation there. So the point of this all is that you swing and miss on one, you move on to the next, and for Georgia right now, Andre Green Jr. may truly be that next, so that's probably a story worth following. And there's also this worth mentioning as well, that while the month of July kind of starts with a little bit of bad news, not unexpected, but bad news nonetheless, boy, there is reason to believe that there could be good recruiting news on the horizon for UGA. You start thinking about late in the month of July. We've talked a lot before about Branson Robinson. His commitment date coming up a little bit later on this month. We now know that on that same day, Danny Dennis-Sutton, very impressive, pass rusher, defensive line, kind of a slash type player on the defensive front. He's also got a commitment date coming up at that same time there as well. They had a very interesting interaction on Twitter over the weekend. I want to show this to you. So Danny Dennis-Sutton says he's going to be making his commitment announcement on July 22nd. A lot of folks really believing that Dennis-Sutton could be trending towards the Dogs as of late, which is a fun thing. Branson Robinson, knowing that's his commitment date there as well, says same date, same school. He asked that to Danny Dennis-Sutton, and certainly UGA fans like the possibility of that being true. And so a little later on this month, for sure, Georgia fans get a chance to think about a couple of big commitments, and won't that be some exciting recruiting momentum for this 2022 class if it does indeed go down that way. So really fun stuff all the way around. That's Around the Doghouse here today, assisted by my friends at AAA. And, of course, when you think about AAA, obviously you think about the legendary roadside assistance. I know many of you have been traveling over the course of the last couple of days, and that's always a great part of all that. But I also want you to think about auto insurance when it comes to AAA, because those who switch and save with AAA can save on average of $529. It's great savings, great opportunity. Make sure you check that out today AAA.com/auto insurance. Once again, that website, AAA.com/auto insurance. And it's great to have AAA delivering around the doghouse to us here today. All right, before we're done, another piece of news that has not been discussed on this show because it happened prior to us pre-recording the show for Thursday was, I don't know if you say former Georgia defensive back or not, but one time thought to be transferred to Georgia, Brandon Turnage. Upon leaving Alabama, it looked like Turnage might be coming to Georgia. Now it appears that he's going elsewhere. That is official now. We will deal with that on the program today. Also, for those of you that watch on video, you should know that for Friday's show, I went back and added a portion to the podcast at the very beginning to address the sad news of Mark Richt, the great former Georgia coach, his recent announcement that he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. I talked about what Coach Richt meant to me in the podcast edition of the show on Friday. So if you're only a video listener, video viewer, maybe check out Friday's podcast for some of my thoughts in the moment directly related to all of that. I'm also going to give John Stinchcomb a chance to discuss that here coming up in just a moment too. So we'll do all of that with him. Also, we're rolling out name, image, likeness. That era is upon us. We have some new details from Georgia about what is and isn't permitted in all of this. So we'll just kind of cover it all here. Busy day. Great day for you to be with us. It's DawgNation Daily presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Let's talk to John Stinchcomb right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
It's always a pleasure to speak to John Stinchcomb. Normally for us, it's a Monday. Today, it is a Tuesday. John shared some video with me over the course of his weekend. Great to see he and his family enjoying that holiday weekend, as we all try to do. You know, life gets busy, so when you can slow down and spend a little time with those that you enjoy, your family, your friends, everything else, that's what it's really all about here, John. So I'm glad to know that you were having a good time over the weekend. I'm very thankful to have you here as a part of DawgNation Daily presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia today, and certainly hope you're doing well here on this Tuesday.
I'm doing great, and I'm hoping and I'm certain that I'm not alone in having enjoyed a beautiful 4th of July weekend.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I certainly did there as well, and I trust that our audience did too. And, of course, John, as we did do that, I'm sure you're very much like me, continuing to really sincerely pray for Coach Mark Richt and continue to keep him in our minds there as well. I mentioned this a little bit on the show on Friday on the heels of the announcement that Coach Richt is I guess, dealing with a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. I don't know Coach Richt as well as you do, but he's been an incredibly pivotal figure in my life because, frankly, he's a little bit of a beacon to aspire to. You know, he's one of those guys that you kind of just want to be more like because no one seems to have a better understanding of what true priorities are supposed to be and how to, you know, live your life well in the face of the, you know, the competitive environment that college football is, but also the dignity that exists beyond that of just being a good dad and a good husband and everything else. Coach Richt seems to have all that figured out. So in light of the Parkinson's diagnosis for Richt, you know, how much has he been on your mind here as of late?
Oh, daily. Once you hear that news, I'm immediately grateful that he's got the perspective that he's got. I mean, you look at the very first quote of when he announced via Twitter, and his perspective is that this is a light affliction, is I think the wording he chose in describing Parkinson's, and it was in comparison to his confirmed future in heaven, which, you know, anytime you deal with someone who's got that kind of perspective, sure. It certainly does. I think it helps everyone. I think it helps everyone see that there's more to this world and more to this life than just the pains and struggles that we face on a daily basis. And obviously Parkinson's is a serious disease that, most notably Michael J. Fox has dealt with, and you watch the struggles that he's had over the years. And I'm sure Parkinson's has been Googled more throughout the state of Georgia in this past 4 or 5 days to kind of understand what that impact's going to be on Coach Richt. But just knowing that he has the perspective that he does and what he's taken and what he's presented is comforting for all of us. And also knowing that he's loved by so many, and he's got that support network of folks that he's impacted and is wanting and willing to step in and help and and love and care on him as he faces the struggles that Parkinson's demands of everyone that it afflicts.
Coach Richt has a well-defined, well-crafted persona. There's an image that's conjured up immediately when people like me think of Coach Richt, except you know the person beyond the persona of the actual person. You were, spending a lot of time with him as a player for him in your final years there at UGA. What about Richt the person is maybe a little different, or what's that experience like to be with Richt the person, kind of getting beyond the persona that gets established when you're a coach in the same spot in the SEC for 15 years? What's Richt the person actually like?
Well, what's good is that his authenticity has allowed people to know him without knowing him. What the perception is that he's a caring, selfless man that puts others first and has the priorities of just being a giver. And those of us that were fortunate enough to have personal experiences with him know that to be true, and that that authenticity that you hope for with so many of the well-known personas, that it's not always the case of what they project to the outside and to the public. It doesn't always match up to the individual that you know on a daily basis. And with Coach Richt, that very much is true. It holds true that his authenticity of being selfless and caring for others and having that as a priority, that's not fake. And it's benefited so many. I think when you first heard of this diagnosis, it was rampant, the number of former players and teammates and coaches and co-workers that came out and were just supportive of him and grateful for the impact that he continues to have on so many. And it just holds true for literally everyone. We spoke, Coach Richt and I had, he's recently written a book on leadership and starting to promote that. And there was a couple of stories from 20 years ago when we were together at the University of Georgia that we were trying to scrape off the rust from those crusty memories that still hold true when you talk about good leadership. So it was fun to kind of bounce those ideas off one another as you go through some pretty pleasant memories of Georgia back in the day.
That's great to hear. I want to change the subject here a little bit. There's a guy named Seth Emerson who covers UGA, recently shared on social media an email that Georgia sent out to some of its fans and boosters regarding the do's and don'ts for the name, image, likeness era that we're now a part of. It's been rolled out over the course of the last several days. I would say for me thus far, nothing that's come out has been all that earth-shattering. I haven't really seen, big money, for anybody as of yet throughout this, but different folks are announcing their own things here. It's kind of an interesting thing to see. Georgia, if you're watching on video, you can see the email they sent out on the screen. I guess, John, one of the things that's kind of interesting to me about what Georgia sent out was in the list of don'ts that one of the things that you're not allowed to do is it says that student athletes cannot sign gear or any other item provided by UGA in exchange for any form of compensation. That means jerseys, cleats, gloves, etc. So I think one of the things that has come out over the years of, hey, maybe A.J. Green, what he did years ago, maybe that's not such a bad thing anymore. But at least according to this on the do's and don'ts front, is that still would not be allowed. So, John, I think it's really interesting to watch the way all of us are trying to figure out exactly, what this is, what is available, what's not available. And I don't know if you're like me, but I feel like it's going to take us a little while here to determine how exactly all this is going to look in the days, weeks, months, and maybe even years to come.
Well, it's not even uniform from state to state right now.
Right.
I mean, this is a new marketplace for everyone, and luckily I think Georgia has a jump on a lot of places because they've one, the legislation was in place before the NCAA approved it this past week. But Will Lawler's the compliance director for Georgia athletes, and they've had numerous discussions and forums and educational opportunities for their student athletes to know the do's and don'ts. And so this, that email that went out, it's for the rest of us to try to play catch up and understand as an alumni, what can I do as a board member? If I'm a booster, what are my opportunities? What are the do's and don'ts? It's important for us to know so we don't jeopardize these student athletes' eligibility. It's not a free-for-all. There are still limitations as to what they can get paid for and what they can't. Now, there's a great array and opportunity of just forums and platforms and various ways that they can maximize and utilize this name, image, likeness profitability window that did not exist prior to now, but there are still limitations. And oddly enough, you look at social media and there is a vast misunderstanding of what can and can't be done. And, a former teammate of mine, Reggie Bush, there's a big push for him to get his Heisman back and then restore some records back at USC, just because you look at it almost comes across as hypocritical, and A.J. Green is no different because of the suspensions that he faced. But there are still limitations as to what these athletes can and can't do.
I think it's interesting that the email from Georgia, in terms of what can be done, says you can reach out to student athletes via social media, phone, in person, online marketplace, or their marketing agent, if applicable, to inquire about possible NIL deals. I mean, to me, John, when it comes to a lot of this kind of stuff, that's as different as almost anything in terms of the fact that I think in the past, programs kind of like the idea of building a pretty substantial firewall in between the average booster and fan and the players themselves, trying to limit that contact as much as possible. But the very first line of this email says, no, you can reach out to them now. Obviously, that's just, it has to be that way for the NIL stuff to even have a chance of taking shape. But if you want to see in black and white print just how much this has changed, Georgia sending an email to its fans and boosters essentially saying have at it and reach out to these guys and offer them money. That's just a very different world in which we live in now.
Isn't it crazy? I mean, they used to be the gatekeepers, and now they cannot be.
Right. The
program can't seek. They can't be the agent for the student athletes. And, there are some risks there. There's a great opportunity because the marketplace is wide open. But there's a lot of risk. You're talking about 18, 19-year-old kids that are now doing financial opportunity dealings on their own behalf. Now, some can seek out marketing agents, which is an entirely different ball of wax. It comes with its own issues. So, an agent that just so happens to represent NFL players might sign a contract to be the marketing agent solely, obviously not to represent them as players, but to help them with marketing. Now, whether or not that leads to them signing as their sports representatives when that time comes, I guess time will tell, B.A., but, it's certainly interesting to think about the different ways in which these players can access the marketplace and those third-party entities that are wanting and willing to help these student athletes garner and harness their name, image, and likeness into a profitable endeavor. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because it's brand new for all of us. But you correct me where I'm wrong here, but I haven't seen anyone hit some new blockbuster deal where you go, wow, that's a real game changer for someone.
Yeah, and there's been no big bucks thus far. I mean, there was the thing about Master P's son getting, $2 million. But I have a hard time believing that's exactly true. But in terms of like the football players that we know about and care about, I haven't seen any kind of big bucks deal yet. I mean, listen, maybe they'll get some. Maybe it'll be Georgia guys. I certainly wish them well in all of this. But thus far, there's been a lot of social media chatter, a lot of direct advertising type announcements, but the big brand advertising where the big bucks really come from a lot of like big blue chip type companies. We just haven't seen a lot of that as of yet. Maybe we will see that in the months to come, but as of yet, there has not been a lot of that thus far. Hey, I want to ask you about something I talked about at the very top of the program involving the Georgia wide receiver situation. Before I do that, let me remind folks that normally Tuesdays in this show means our Kroger Fresh Take. We'll get back to that next Tuesday, but quick shout out to Kroger for now. Don't forget, they've got some great blowout deals for you here this summer. Still a chance for you to save big on the stuff to make the rest of the summer really fun. 50% off pool toys, patio furniture, outdoor decorations, and more. Make sure you check that out at your local Kroger here today. Go to Kroger.com or just stop by the Kroger right there in your neighborhood and enjoy some of that. 50% off savings on the stuff that makes summer fun. That's what you can count on Kroger for here this time of year. John, before I let you go, I do want to get a thought from you on the current situation involving Georgia wide receivers. Dogs missed out on four-star Kojo Antwi over the course of the last day. He chooses Ohio State instead of UGA. And for some Georgia fans, it serves as a reminder for what Georgia's not doing recruiting the wide receiver position and compared to what it is doing with so many other position groups. I'll say that Georgia's actually recruited the receiver spot maybe a little bit better than it should, given its somewhat meager results from the passing game the last few years. But clearly for me, all of this just puts a big spotlight on the need for Georgia to use the receivers that it has, get big years out of them. And if that takes place, then the Georgia receiver recruiting situation is going to be every bit what Georgia needs for it to be to remain in the national championship discussion. I would say a lot of additional pressure on this offense to perform big and perform well here this year. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think the greatest UGA wide receiver recruiting tool for 2021 hasn't taken place yet, and that's what this season's going to look like. With so many new faces that are going to be counted upon, a Rick Gilbert, some of the young guys, the expanded role of Jermaine Burton, who's going to fill the role of George Pickens while he's still recovering from injury. Which one of these young receivers, which were highly touted when they were recruited, is going to step in and play the roles that are needed in this offense? Because quite honestly, you look at it on paper and you have to be fired up that JT Daniels is your quarterback and you're in year 2 of a Todd Monken offense. So I think it's all promise and at this point, but this offense could be very explosive and highlight these wide receivers in a way that is going to be very attractive to a high school senior trying to figure out where's a good fit for him to expand his game and utilize those tools that he possesses to make a profession out of catching the ball. So just give it time for all the dog fans out there that get upset about every recruit that commits in the middle of July. As we've seen time and time again, Georgia does a really impressive job of closing when it matters most. And we've also seen multiple times, George Pickens included, that a great wide receiver can change his mind late in the game once all the cards are on the table.
No, I think that's exactly right. John, it's great to get a chance to talk to you today. I appreciate your thoughts on the dogs here. I'll look forward to speaking to you soon. Hope you had a great week. Have a great week upcoming, and thanks for being here once again on DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG.
Always enjoy it, BA. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
One of the things that John brought up there a moment ago in regards to the name, image, likeness stuff and the fact that it's still a little bit different across the states, which is something that I think some of the powers that be in college athletics would still like to kind of level that playing field a little bit and I guess standardize the NIL process across the board a bit. One example where it's a little bit different, I saw over the weekend where LSU is going to allow its players to use the LSU marks, the trademarks, the logos, as a part of their advertising. And I can tell you right now, I mean, first of all, in the email that Georgia sent out, the one we shared a moment ago, it specifically says they're not allowed to do that. And, you know, if you ever were, this is kind of in the weeds a little bit. This is, you know, you have to kind of care about the business of all this to think that this is interesting probably. But if there was ever going to be a school that would be the last to relinquish their marks for athletes to use, to me, it would be Georgia. Georgia's just fairly protective over that. And, you know, if LSU is going to do that, that is a way of being different. I mean, it makes me wonder, like, this doesn't exist in any realm of professional sports. And if you see LeBron James doing a Nike commercial, you know, or, you know, commercials like that, it's not like these athletes get a chance to use the professional sports logo that the team they play for in their own personal endorsements. That's not typically what's allowed there. But I guess there's some schools like LSU that says, yeah, go ahead and do that. We'll let you do that. I mean, if I'm a big company that spent big bucks with a school like LSU to get access to those trademarks, and all of a sudden now an athlete for, relatively speaking, comparatively speaking, pennies, gets a chance to use the same logos and trademarks, I'm pretty upset, and I feel like the value of my investment in LSU athletics is probably not what it once was, but that's one of those things that'll kind of figure itself out in the time to come. Interesting, though, as John said, look at the ways in which different schools are just sort of taking different tacks in all of this, and we'll see who the first athlete to truly cash in a really big way is going to be. We'll continue to follow that and see how all that plays out. SEC through time. We'll roll through a lot of the news on the SEC. I also really quickly want to give a shout out to my friends at Meriwether and Tharp here, your source for Georgia divorce. You can find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. They will walk step by step with you through what can be a really challenging process. The divorce process, scary and confusing, never fun to talk about, but if you're going through it, I can say emphatically you need to have a strong advocate, a fighter for you, a counselor for you, someone that can help explain the way the law impacts you. That's what Meriwether and Tharp does. Find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. They're your source for Georgia divorce. You can find them today. So some news that's been out there for a couple of days since the last time we had a show is the fact that Brandon Turnage, who we thought might be coming to Georgia upon leaving Alabama, and I guess reportedly was in Athens for a while, but eventually kind of went his own way there and is now committed to the University of Tennessee. Tennessee making that official there, and frankly, I don't have too much to say about this other than if Turnage was concerned about depth chart and playing time and things like that, and listen, that may be one of the things that led him to leave Alabama. It may be one of the things that caused him to rethink his situation at Georgia after Darian Kendrick came in. And as I've said before, I mean, it's not obvious to me, and I don't say this to disparage Turnage, who I think is still a really good prospect, but he's a very similar prospect to guys that Georgia already has. Guys like Jalen Kimber, Keely Ringo. I mean, it wasn't obvious to me that Turnage would stand head and shoulders above those guys even before Darian Kendrick came in. But obviously the presence of Darian Kendrick seemed to be uncomfortable for Turnage, so he moves on to Tennessee. If you're looking for immediate playing time, Tennessee has got it in bushels. They got it by the barrel full right now, so that may be the best place for him to be all the way around. As I said before, there's a chance that Turnage still becomes a good player. This was a guy out of Oxford, Mississippi. That's his hometown. Had a lot of SEC interest before choosing Alabama, went to Alabama, hasn't quite found his way on the field there yet. A lot of folks don't in a place like Tuscaloosa, but I don't think there's any doubt that Turnage is an SEC-level player, just a matter of where. It now appears that where is going to be Tennessee. Also on the recruiting front, South Carolina, who continues to be one of the more active programs here as of late, taking a bunch of commitments. They're not all highly rated, but it seems like Shane Beamer is as active on Twitter right now, celebrating commits as really anyone. They do get a big one from the state of Georgia, though. Emory Floyd, good-looking defensive back prospect, he's announced his commitment here to South Carolina. So the Gamecocks getting in there, getting involved, and doing some big things. And honestly, it's kind of interesting to see with a lot of first-year coaches in the SEC. Josh Heupel there at Tennessee, Brian Harsin at Auburn, Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, to the extent you care about that at all. Shane Beamer, of course, at South Carolina. There's not room for everybody to have success, and there's not enough resources. Quality assistants, key players, top recruits. There's never going to be enough to go around, and so it's a matter of who can get their unfair share the quickest. At least on the recruiting trail for the moment, Shane Beamer, the Gamecocks, trying to be pretty aggressive, and at least in the person of Emory Floyd, that pays off. We'll make that your SEC through. Very quickly here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, I want to share something that I think is really fun. You're talking about the dream, the culmination of all kinds of hard work, and you see it pay off for Eric Stokes, who the story's now been told so much, comes to Georgia as an unheralded recruit, a little-known signee from the class of 2017, undersized by almost anyone's estimation maybe at the time, and yet once he gets a chance to play, starting in 2018, over the course of the next couple of years, demonstrates himself to be a top-flight player, goes on to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft, and obviously with that comes the financial rewards that are justified after and earned and well earned after years and years and years of hard work. And for so many of the guys that go through that, they want to take care of those that have helped take care of them and help get them to that spot. This is a great thing to see on Stokes' Instagram. He says, since I've been 14 years old, I promised my grandmama I'd get her out of the projects where she's lived for over 30 years. and video being shared here. Do we have some audio on this, or is this just video only? This is just video only. So for those of you watching, you see Stokes on his Instagram sharing this. His grandmother finds out this is going to be her house. It is a beautiful home, and it's so nice to see Stokes and those that he loves there to share that hug and that time with his grandmother. I'm telling you what, right here now, y'all, this is what it's all about. This is one of the reasons why that, we love the idea in this country of sports being such a big deal, because it's these kinds of family stories, guys like Stokes showing how much family means to him and how much a good home for those that have helped him have a loving home growing up and given himself a chance to cash in on his football dream. That is good stuff to see. When I post the show later on today at DawgNation.com, I'll put a link to Stokes' Instagram. It's obviously easy for you to find there as well, but I'll put a link to this video. This is the kind of thing that everybody should see, that everybody should enjoy. Eric Stokes doing very, very well by his grandmother there and showing some love to her. That is a great thing to be able to see. Congratulations to Eric on a great career at Georgia, upcoming terrific career in the NFL, and certainly showing some love to his family, which is something we love to be able to see there. So really wonderful stuff. That's just incredible. Very, very nice. Let's finish the show the way we do. Gatorade roll call. Let's go through and do a couple of golden shoes here today. I think I have a couple to give out. Let me start with our buddy Seth Stokes here. I should say Seth Rhodes for a moment, who says that at DawgNation Daily, I did find something a Georgia fan and a Florida fan can agree on. He says it's the Finnish long drink. So you see Seth Rhodes there with a Florida fan next to him. They're both enjoying. I see the long drink cranberry. I see the original, the long drink with the citrus. Really good to see some Finnish long drink. Bringing the two factions together, Georgia fans and Florida fans. That's really good stuff from Seth Rhodes. Seth will make you a golden shoe winner for today. Also, this is a funny thing in honor of the American Revolution and our nation's birthday from yesterday. How about George Washington doing a stone cold stunner? Matt Dog 80 says, this is how I think DawgNation Daily imagined the American Revolution. You better believe, Matt. That's good stuff all the way around. How about Gator Hater Countdown? 116 days from now, Dogs get some revenge over the Gators. We'll look forward to talking to you again tomorrow. It's DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We shall see you then. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all that for you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. That is what R.S. Andrews can do for you today. Good chance for us to take some live comments, something we have not done since, I guess, Thursday. I did hope that you enjoyed the chat we did on Friday's show. I had fun with that. Something we had not done before. That was kind of a cool thing to be able to do. So I was glad we were able to do it. All right, let's hit YouTube here for a moment. We'll take some comments there. Jay Shipe's not a wrestling fan. Hate to hear that. Let's see what else. G. Grace Bama Boy. And he and Frank Patterson going back and forth. Lord, what are y'all talking about over here? And Jeremy Howard says, I hope that Eric Stokes becomes an NFL superstar. He's a great kid. Yeah, one of the easiest guys to root for you'll ever see. And honestly, that's one of the cool things about this job is you do get a chance to meet some of these guys in a way that you would not if you were doing something different. And one of the things I can say as a Georgia fan that is really, really enjoyable for me is just how many guys that have come through the Georgia program in recent years. Stokes a great example of this, who are just really easy to root for, very fun to root for. It's just a really good thing to be able to see. So I love it, and I'm so proud for Eric. And there's nothing better than to use that NFL money as a way of showing some love to your grandmother there. That's just a really cool thing. Brady Past Management brings up what I think is really a good point. He says a guy like Shane Beamer is what ends up costing Jeff Collins his job at Georgia Tech. If you can't out-recruit South Carolina, you ain't going to make it. That's the problem, Brady. I think you're right about this, is that, there are so many programs that are coming into the Atlanta area, the state of Georgia, not UGA itself. I mean, Georgia, if anything, has in some cases not been as involved in Atlanta as you might think. But South Carolina definitely wants to be. Tennessee definitely wants to be. Program like Auburn's trying to get back in there a little bit. But, South Carolina in particular, who definitely wants to, that's not a program you think of as kind of like one of those top upper tier SEC programs. When they come into Atlanta, when they come into the state of Georgia and have some success, around there, it does make things more difficult for a program like Georgia Tech. And it's one of the reasons why, and I don't say this to this is just a fact. This is not me trolling Georgia Tech. It's just a fact that the whole 404, the culture thing, like you're the school of Atlanta, when there are probably at least a half dozen teams more popular in Atlanta than Georgia Tech is, it's a tough brand to establish when Atlanta as a college football market is so splintered. Take UGA out of it. I mean, there are tons of Auburn alumni, tons of, just all kinds of schools that have big presence in Atlanta, even beyond just UGA. Bank 6 says Brandon Turnage may have to play corner, receiver, maybe even left tackle for Tennessee because they don't have anyone. And Bank's pretty correct about that. All right, let's see what else. What are y'all talking about over here? Some days I just never know. See, y'all get mad at me for not taking enough YouTube comments, and y'all are all over the map here. All over the map here. I mean, listen, I'm glad y'all are having fun, but I got to try to keep it between the banks here on the show. Let me go over to Facebook here for a moment. Hope everybody's doing well over there. Isaac Cruz says, was it really me in the comment section on Friday? I would never use a ghost commenter. Of course it was me. Plus, I'm nicer than Connor is. Let's see what else. By the way, Connor's on vacation this week. Nick Roundtree says, if Mullen was my coach, it might drive me back to actually wanting to consume alcohol. Yeah, I was going to show the Mullen thing with, surfing. I wish one of our we have, whether it be Ben Green or, or Bass and Dog, some of these guys that are really good with some of this kind of stuff. I kind of want to do a thing with, the Mullen surfboard with, Kirby Shark chasing him from behind. I kind of like the idea of that. Maybe like a Georgia, headline for it. I feel like we got some talented people in our audience maybe able to pull that off. Xavier Kyle says, let's not sweat Kojo's commitment. If Kirby lets Monken turn loose this fall, they're going to, and that's what it comes down to, Xavier, right, is you got to show that offense off on the field here this fall. You got to. And the fact of the matter is that even with some high-profile losses when it comes to receiver recruiting, Georgia's still recruiting that position better now than it has in previous years. Brian Whitehead, I agree with you that Eric Stokes' video was awesome. Let's see what else. George and Olive said, since the Ringling Brothers Circus is closed for good, Dan Mullen had nowhere else to go but to Florida. That's very funny from George Ann. Matt Rukavina, good to see you as well. Jermaine King says we're talking NIL over here. Well, that's good to know. They're talking religion and stuff over there, which, listen, I'm not saying that's not an appropriate topic. Sometimes I'm just not going to do it on this comment section. Dustin Goodwin wants to hear from Mike Johnson again soon. I'd like to do that there as well. Mike is busy these days, but I hope to get him here pretty soon. Chris Slim White says it's Georgia Tech's grade point average, what makes it hard to get players in the program. For some reason, they weren't having some of those grade point issues, academic issues back with the basketball team back in the 80s and the early 90s. So that's one of those things that seems to be, a convenient excuse when it needs to be. Lucy Bowers-Boykin says I didn't learn anything but the comments on Friday. I enjoyed it. It's fun to be able to be a part of it. How about this? Chase Jesse Ava Barbie saying, glad to be back. Just had a 10-pound, 4-ounce girl last month. Her first words would be, sick 'em. That's awesome. What great news. She can learn mom and daddy after the football season. That is great news. Congratulations to all you, and very, very proud of that. Very, very proud of that. Randy Hall says about the SEC West pick. So we're going to make official predictions here around the time of SEC Media Days. So that's coming up in a few days. We'll do our official predictions around then. Jonathan Moore says, I think Tech could benefit from name, image, likeness, but it's going to be years before they see those results. I just think that like everybody wants to make it seem like they're going to be a big part of the name, image, likeness stuff, and everybody's trying to push that. But the thing that you got to have is you got to have some companies who are willing to kind of step forward and pay the big bucks, and that's just the kind of thing that, I mean, it's just not an endless supply of companies who want to do that. It's just not. There's going to be an endless supply of agents who want to try to connect players to deals and things like that. And I don't fault them necessarily for doing that, but the NIL chatter is going to outpace the actual NIL deals by about 20-1. That's just the way it's going to go. And that's one of the reasons why, I mean, this is sort of the way we said it was going to go too, right? It's like, there'd be all kinds of talk and all kinds of chatter, but ultimately there's just not a huge market for big bucks for stuff like this. There's just not. But maybe some Georgia players can cash in here. Scott Harris says, just turned 56 last weekend. Scott, happy birthday to you. Thomas Dyson says, Hankton isn't bad, but he's far from the best wide receiver coach in the nation. Yeah, I mean, certainly Brian Hartline at Ohio State, certainly one of the best. And I think it's just important when you think about Hankton, when you think about the wide receiver recruitment overall, I think you just have to sort of think about the full, complete picture of this. Is that right now Georgia is a program that lags behind other programs when it comes to both wide receiver productivity and certainly wide receiver recruitment. But Georgia has done a lot in recent years to close that gap. 4 top 10 composite receivers over the course of the last 3 recruiting cycles is not an insignificant accomplishment. It's not. So Georgia, because of the recruiting success that it's had, and if it can get just a little bit of injury luck, is actually poised to demonstrate more capable receiver play than it has in a number of years. So that's the full picture. There's still work that needs to be done, but there's a lot of work that has taken place that gives Georgia a real shot here. Bank 6 also pointing out, a July commitment. There's a chance to change your mind on that. And that's certainly a possibility there as well. A Green Soldier says, what's your take on the current coaching staff at UGA for the wide receivers? I'm not all that impressed so far, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I think this is obviously a big year for that performance. I think when you look at guys that have come to Georgia, they certainly cite Cortez Hankton as a reason why. Many of the Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saints, the players like that have mentioned Hankton in particular as one of the reasons they chose UGA. But the bigger issue, though, is to me, it's not about individual coaching at the position. It's about an offense that exploits wide receivers and that really gives them a great platform to perform on. And that's what Georgia's got to do right now. They've got to create that offense that schemes its receivers open. I don't think that was something that James Coley was capable of doing, and now we're 2 years removed from that. And now it's an opportunity to provide for the kind of wide receiver productivity the very best teams in the country are going to have. So I guess sort of a roundabout way to answer your question is that I think a lot of this comes down to what happens this year. This year will demonstrate, is Georgia a program on track at the receiver position, or is it a program that demonstrates there's still a lot of work yet to be done? Also, Green Soldier asking about the quarterback situation there at Ohio State, which is still yet to be determined. There, obviously, a couple of names there in the mix to be the starter there for the Buckeyes, but it's a program that's been good with the passing game going back a number of years. So even if you're still waiting to see, who emerges as the starting quarterback at Ohio State, there's a little bit of a long-term track record of passing success. Obviously, Ryan Day, a big part of that I think these guys are kind of buying into. Ace Dog checking out. Glad to have you here. G. Grace mentioning the idea that Herschel Walker may be running for the United States Senate. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly out there, and it seems like that's kind of the direction all this is heading. It's still a political topic for us, which means that, for the most part, that's not something we'll address here on this show, just because it's one of the things. Look, I try to, keep this as like politics free as possible because I want it to be a Big Tent. Now, the one thing I have no patience for are the people who get like really, really offended by the littlest thing. I'm not going to bend over backwards to, try to appease someone who's looking for a way to be offended. But the easiest thing for us to do for the most part is just to keep the conversation about football and kind of do our job there on that. By the way, Foster Moss says 8 more Saturdays. Really excited about that. Bubby Dean checking in. Boy, I guess Bubby's back from his – Bubby sent some pictures. I forget if it's Costa Rica, wherever he was, but Bubby was just living the life, man. It was great to see. He must be back in town now. He says the offensive line will determine if we're successful. We have enough talented players to win if the offensive line can protect. And Bubby's right about that in a lot of ways, that a lot of that success for Georgia this year is going to come down to how good that offensive line ends up being. Let's see what else. Matt Rugavina says Mullen won't be feeling quite so cool after Kirby puts 40-plus on him. Yeah, that's pretty good. Miriam Martin Corbin says she's sorry she missed Friday. Was helping get a big barbecue ready for several hundred people. Miriam, that's great to see. Junior Baker, good to see him checking in. Haven't heard from Junior in a while. Says we averaged 32 points a game last year, so that would be a really good improvement with JT Downs as quarterback in the last 4 games. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the hope, right, is that you look for Georgia's standpoint, those final 4 games a year ago, just a more explosive offense all the way around. If you can kind of pull that out for a full season, what you have a chance to do after that. A lot of Georgia fans hope Junior's right about that. All right, we're going to get ready to go. Randy Hall on the idea of having Thomas Davis on the show. Yeah, that's one that I definitely want to do. That's for sure one of those things I want to do. Mike Tiffany says, I keep trying to remind myself this is the only football news there is to talk about, and I'm trying not to hold it against media outlets forcing us to OD on recruiting news right now. Well, I would say, though, that, look, it's the recruiting battles, the way they're waged in July and August, whatever else, that actually form the backbone for the class that gets signed in December. And you can say, well, it's July. There's still a chance for players to change their mind. There are. But the honest truth is there'll be less of that than the other. And, listen, when it comes to the Antwi thing, we said for days that he wasn't choosing Georgia. So this is not, sky is falling type news. Kojo Antwi was not, at least on this show, expected to pick UGA. But, when a player that was in the mix for Georgia doesn't choose UGA, we are going to talk about it. I mean, we're not going to pretend it didn't happen just because, I don't know. Matt Rugavina says the only news I want from this time of year is no injuries. Yeah, obviously you're looking for good health here. Brett Oglesby on the subject of a Jamari Salyer potentially starting at left tackle. To me, that's the safest choice of the Clemson game. And then you can do something else after that. But I've always felt that the Jamari Salyer at left tackle for Clemson is just the safest thing there. Jonathan Moore wants to hear more from Todd Monken. That'd be nice. That'd be nice. That one's going to be up to Kirby, though. But we should get a chance to hear from Monken probably once before the season begins, and maybe you'll have some interesting things to say. Miriam Martin Corbin says you can't have JT getting hurt against Clemson. For sure, that's true. 1 or 2 more on YouTube, and we're going to get ready to go. Yeah, Christy asking about Emory Floyd, who did commit to South Carolina. DMart42 says if we had a real shot at Kojo Antwi, Jeff would have been on site. I don't think that Kojo did a ceremony, though, did he? All right, let's see what else. I am curious to see Crow King 123 mentioning Jaden Hazelwood, who was hurt last year but healthy again now. It'll be interesting to see how big of a year he has for Oklahoma here this year. Should be very interesting. All right, let's get ready to go. Appreciate y'all being here. Make sure you check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. Obviously, a little bit of a postmortem over there on the end of the season for the Atlanta Hawks and kind of what comes next. Obviously, Nate McMillan has had the interim tag taken off of him. He's now full-fledged head coach for Atlanta. And there's a lot of talk about what comes next in terms of the roster management situation with Atlanta, looking to keep this core nucleus together as long as it can, but that may not be forever. So interesting stuff there. AJC.com on that. Braves lost last night, but have played a little better as of late. Max Fried got beat up a little bit last night, but the Braves kind of trying to do what they can to keep pace with the Mets, especially after taking 3 or 4 from New York a few days ago. So Braves news kind of heating up as the Hawks news subsides. We got Atlanta Falcons training camp here coming up very soon there as well. So the fun stuff of sports is really here, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution provides a lot of that. Also some serious, scary stuff in the news there as well. Odd golf course shooting in Kennesaw over the weekend. A PGA professional, golf pro shot in the midst of all of that. That's a scary situation. So figure out what's going on with all of that. Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com. Thanks for being here for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Find them online, rsandrews.com. Hot weather, get your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. That is what R.S. Andrews can provide for you. Find them online at rsandrews.com. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We'll see you then, everybody.